Nehemiah. Compare. This is a visual illustration that helps us understand several points. I see 2 points when I look at this. What stands out to you?
Size.
Ah. And what do you mean, size?
Well, in their glory days, now it's not so.
Remember when they came home and they built the temple and they lay the foundation, and some who had seen it before cry. That happened with the temple. Here is nothing. And now here is the foundation of the old wall. So when these people went out there, presumably, unless they took the stones and removed them, presumably when they walked out there, you know, you've been to an old farm, right? The old farm, you're walking through the woods, there's a fence there from 100 years ago. What is the form of that fence? What is the material of the fence from 100 years ago? Rocks.
Yeah.
Stones. Would you say plowed?
No, I said stone.
Yeah, stones. And then you walk out there and you're walking through the woods and you see this pile. You know what it was. In fact, when I see that, I get a little sad. Could you imagine this? When you walk out there, this is God's, this is your nation. This is the capital of your nation. And you walk out here and there's the old fence line. And look what we have now. The same thing here. Here is Israel, the extent of it in Solomon's day. And right now, it's about like that. It's a little bit more. Something like that. In fact, those last two are really horrible. Something like that. That's the extent of it. So what happened in between this to this?
Sin and punishment.
Sin and punishment. Yes, the sin, the punishment is what happened. So we have you look at this picture, and what's the lesson? Sin hurts. Sin hurts. Sin has consequences. I have a friend in Russia. He's a brother in the Lord, a good man. He and his friend, when they first became Christians, were both alcoholics. When they first became Christians, it was New Year's Eve. And you know what a good Russian does on New Year's Eve. And this one Christian said, yeah, let's go. In fact, both of them went out and said, okay, we're going to go have a drink. The next morning, one of them woke up. The other one was dead, frozen in the road. Sin costs. Congregations. You've seen you know of congregations that it was going well, and then something came in. And like a tornado went through there, and at the end of that, right? Now, so sin costs, but at the same time, there's another illustration here. Okay, so they had this big city, they sinned, they were sent away in judgment, but where are they now? And how did they get there?
God's mercy.
God's mercy. They're back in the land. Hey, yeah, sin cost, and I've been there. Why did I do that? How foolish. But now, it's time to start over. It's a new day. I'm going to be excited where I am right now. Yeah, I wish I hadn't have done it, but here I am because of God's grace, and so we have a little bit of joy and excitement about that. Okay, there's just a visual from the maps of the time period. Comment on anything there.
I have a question. The city of David, it looks like it's about 200 feet wall to wall at its narrow point.
Yeah.
Why not just kind of build 200 feet of wall there instead of 4,000 feet down and back up to enclose an extremely small area for the amount of, like, what was it that made hanging on to that section? Why not cut it off at the Tower of the Ovens and be done?
It's sorry?
It's not flat.
No, I know that's
Yeah.
that's at the top of a ridge, but what was in that area that was? Do we know why they would have wanted to keep that section there?
Yes, George. All men want more.
Okay. I mean, they just built a ton of wall to enclose a remarkably small amount of area, is all I'm saying.
No, well, it's a fortress. This is a fortress.
Okay.
You got to understand that this is it's a city, but it is their fortress. Remember, the city of David. Not even your lame, or not even, what did he say?
Yeah.
The lame could defend you, even if you can't. Not even the lame could climb up the hill. Well, yeah, that's obvious.
Because you can't get up here and get
Right.
me.
And even if you did, are lame. So it's a fortress, and so they're going to re-fortify. They're going to fortify a fortress even more. Yeah. I say fortress, and you might be picturing an enclosed building. I actually don't mean that. I just mean it's taking the position or the purpose of a fortress, and that is to go there and hide and defend yourselves, which they've learned that they need. Okay. So in Nehemiah goes back from Susa, which is way over there, comes to Jerusalem, and when he gets back there, this is important. I came to the governors, and I showed them the letters. Chapter 1, verse 10, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about it, it was very displeasing to them that someone had come to seek the welfare of the sons of Israel. Remember, this is the first 6 chapters and more. It's not really a story of Tobiah against Nehemiah. It's just Satan against God, and Satan has his minions, and God has his servants. And in this case, Satan has used Tobiah to get at God through Nehemiah. Nehemiah is just the one. He's the one in the way that day. So they're angry because so I count some 10 times that Sanballat or Tobiah has been mentioned before we get into chapter 12, okay? Chapter 4, verse 1. It came about when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry. They don't want the wall built. And they're consumed by this. This is their passion. All right. So we've gone all the way through chapter 11. We looked very quickly at just a few points from chapter 11. Maybe you have one. Chapter 12, verse 27. At the dedication of the wall. Okay, so they've drawn lots to populate Jerusalem. And now they're going to dedicate this wall. At the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites from all their places to bring them to Jerusalem so that they might celebrate the dedication with gladness, with hymns of thanksgiving, and with psalms to the accompaniment of cymbals and harps and lyres. And they go on and on. Verse 31. This is Nehemiah, I had the leaders of Judah come up to the top of the wall, and I appointed 2 great choirs, the first proceeding to the right on the top of the wall toward the refuse gate. So if you look down here, we have the dung gate. So down here is the dung gate. And he puts them on top of the wall, and they're going to go up the fountain gate, and they're going to walk up the top of the wall, up at least to the water gate. All right? Verse 36, the end of it. Ezra the scribe went before them. So Ezra's still here. And now picture this. These 2 great men of faith. Ezra and Nehemiah. And while you're there in their presence, all you're thinking is, I am thankful to God that I can be here in the presence of these 2 leaders. Because they're helping me to be a better person. Verse 38. The second choir proceeded to the left, while I followed them with half the people on the wall above the tower of the furnaces. So they're going to start over here, and they're going to go up this way, and they're going to go as far as there. I don't know how far these people go over here. I assume they all meet here, but it doesn't state it that way that I can understand. They end up here. That's where they end up, okay? So, but picture this. They're all singing and playing and marching where? On the wall. It kind of doesn't get higher than that, right? So you've got these valley walls, and then you get to the peak, and there's walls that man have built, and on top of those walls, walking around the city, are these choirs. Verse 41, the priests. Verse 43, and on that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced because God had given them great joy even the women and children rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard from afar. They're on top of almost the highest peak around. There's valleys all over the place. This sound, how far do you think it is afar? I don't know. They're on top of a mountain, so they're about 3,000 feet, 2,500, 3,000 feet up. And there's this plain that goes out. I don't know how far it was heard, but it's a ways. It's a ways, right? Now, the sound of joy of Jerusalem was heard from afar. Who's hearing it? Sanballat and Tobiah. Now, who's really in control of what's going on here? What is God doing right here? This is a big in your face.
Well, you shall know that I am.
That's right. Jehovah. Right? That's I always yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You will know that when you come back in the land, the nations will know who the real God is. You remember what happened? Remember what happened in chapter 6 when they built it in 52 days? They lost their confidence, for they recognized that the work had been accomplished with the help of our God. They know what's going on. This is Jehovah saying to everybody, I am the king, I'm the Lord, I'm powerful. If you're with me, then you'll be rejoicing. If you're not, it's going to be a sad day. And so this is him rubbing their noses on it because that's what they chose, right? You want to say more, Gary? And it's not recorded in here, but I have in a text at home, it says Sanballat and Tobiah repented and nobody ever gave them problems ever again.
Really? Read that here?
No, that's not what happens, right? They lose, but do they give up? You know, we're seeing an illustration of this right now in politics because it's in human beings. They get something in their mind and they will not give it up. Now, the worst case scenario is that they have it in their mind to be against God and they will not give it up. So what you're seeing going on right now in our politics is the exact same thing that's going on here, except the goal, the direct, immediate goal is different, right? Okay. So, in chapter 12, I do want us to note this. It said in verse 43, on that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced, listen, because God had given them great joy. Now here we're back to our picture. What's their situation? It's not this. It's not this anymore. They don't have that anymore. They don't have all that anymore. They got this little tiny part in this little tiny city up there. And yet what do they have in their hearts? Joy. Because, is it this wall that really matters? Not really. It's that God's with them. God is with them. So God is allowed. Look, I made a mistake. I did foolishness. And I grieve for it. But here I am now. And I've repented. And God works with me. And I see that. I say, thank you, God. In fact, I have great joy. I rejoice. I tell others, I made mistakes, but I've repented. Verse 27 said, at the beginning of the dedication, they sought out the Levites so that they might celebrate the dedication with gladness. God said, go build the city. They build the city, and then what do? They celebrate. Why? One way to say it is that because they had obeyed God. We obeyed God. We accomplished what He wanted us to do. We celebrated. Does that have any application for us today? Are we told to build a wall? No. But I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm victorious over my selfishness, I sit there and have a little party. Yes, I won that one. Glory be to God that I had a little victory. When children nowadays transition from the 4th grade to the 5th grade, what do? We have a yes, that's right. That's what I'm doing, right? Although I had the grades wrong, I did that on purpose. Yeah, but So we want to celebrate. Okay, great. Now, if you're going to celebrate something, celebrate not mediocrity, but the best and most important thing. In fact, it might be small, but don't lose that celebration, even for the small things. Because if you only celebrated the big things, then what will you always want? The big things. And when you're just being, faithful, you'll start to lose the importance of that. Right? You want the sensation. I want the sensational victories. Well, make the small victories sensational, right? Very important. Even baby steps, we celebrate for babies, right? Look, he took a little step. It was just a baby. Yes, but it was huge for him. And we baby step all the way to the kingdom, Lord willing. Comments or questions here? Okay. Verse 44, on that day the men were also appointed over the chambers for the stores, for the contributions of the first fruits, for the tithes, to gather them from the fields of the cities of the portions required by law, as they had already said that they would do. Now they're just, we're actually figuring out the logistics of what we said we would do. And so they built the city. They've got everything up and running in the city. The city the walls are built, it's being populated. Okay, what can happen now? The city is built and the temple is built. What can happen now?
Appropriate worship.
Yep. I'm looking for a specific answer. That wasn't it. That's true. Appropriate worship. Yep. Let me give you a hint.
Slack off, relax.
Yep. That's not what I'm looking for. I'll give you another hint. What does Daniel say in Daniel chapter 9 would happen? The city would be rebuilt. Messiah would come to the city, and then it would be destroyed. So, now, God had been saying, you need to get the city built, you need to get the city built, you need to get the city built. Well, Nehemiah, he doesn't know why, other than, he might have had some insight into the prophecy, he might have understood it, but basically, a lot of them are just sitting around, okay, we got to build the city. Okay, so I'll build the city. That's the end goal as far as they're concerned. But we know there's a bigger picture going on. Now that the city is built, God's plan can occur. And that is, the Messiah can come to that city. He can come to that temple, Malachi chapter 3 will say. And, furthermore, the Romans can come and destroy it. I'm guessing not everybody in Nehemiah's day understood the bigger picture. Let me ask you something. We see this with building the temple or building the tabernacle, right? We saw it with build the tabernacle. Just build it. I'm telling you, build it this way. And so they, in obedience, they build it that way. What do we know about the way it was planned?
Copy of the heavenly things.
It's a copy of the heavenly things. They didn't know that. We read the Old Testament. No, you don't get that until it's really spelled out in Hebrews chapter 9. It's spelled out in Hebrews chapter 9. Look, I had them build that way as a picture of something better. When they were building it, they did not know that. They didn't know it. All they were doing was obeying. Now, what if they hadn't obeyed? Same with Nehemiah. I'm assuming that all of them understood, hey, now these prophecies can be fulfilled. So they were just building the wall. What if they hadn't obeyed, like they had not been obeying? I don't even like to think about if they hadn't obeyed. But turn with me to Ephesians. So much about them. Our question is more about ourselves. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 8. To me, Paul writes, the very least of all the saints, this grace was given to preach to the Gentiles the unfathomable riches of Christ, Ephesians 3:9, and to bring to light what is the administration of the mystery which has been for ages has been hidden in God, who created all things, so that the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through the church to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. Do you see what God is doing with you? I don't understand it all, and I don't see every little thing. But I understand this principle, God says obey, and there's two things at least going on. One, he's just obeying, and secondly, God is doing something bigger when he obeys. And that's exactly what's happening here. When I obey, God, in his manifold wisdom, the manifold wisdom of God is made known through the church to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly places. I have no idea how that works. But I asked a minute ago, did they know what they were doing other than obeying? Probably not. In some cases, definitely not. But they had to obey. The same with me. The same with all of us. God says, here's the New Testament pattern. Whatever it is, obey it, Lee. I know at least two things are happening. Number one, when I obey it, I'm obeying it. Yay. And at the same time, something bigger is going on, which only emphasizes how much more I want to obey, I want to know what it is, and follow it. Otherwise, I'm not playing my part in making known God's wisdom to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly places. I have no idea what more is going on, but I know it's there. Comments or questions here? Somebody has two comments or questions. And it went like this. Two. Okay. This brings us to Nehemiah 13. Nehemiah 13, we're going to skip down to verse 6. During all this time, I was not in Jerusalem. For in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had gone to the king. After some time, however, I asked leave from the king, and I came to Jerusalem. All right. This is what I get from Nehemiah. Here's Nehemiah's timeline. I'm sorry that it doesn't go across like most people like. Yes. Did I just throw your whole night off? You'd be amazed at the number of people who say the timeline didn't go across. It wasn't horizontal. So I have to change it. I literally have to change them because, okay, all right, you think horizontally, I do too. But this one was done very hastily.
Your super timeline.
Let's not, I've been the recipient of some, and that was it. It was diagonal. The line was, it wasn't the massive amount of information. It was that the line was diagonal.
I thought you were trying to appease everybody, something on it.
Yes, right. I have to remember that. But it can't please everybody.
Make it a circle next time.
December, 444 or so BC. I say December because I'm using our months for our years and their years also. Nehemiah receives news of Jerusalem's distress. We read that. April, 444 BC. Nehemiah asks Artaxerxes to go to Jerusalem. And then usually it takes about 5 months, 4 or 5 months. If he's traveling swiftly, it'll take a month and a half, 2 months, okay? Nehemiah is made governor sometime in 444 BC. Okay, this is all, we've seen this. September in 443 BC, Nehemiah and Israel finished rebuilding the wall. Now, October of 443 BC, Nehemiah and Israel read the law and recommit to it. That's chapter 7 and 8, where Ezra reads the law. And then, October in 443 BC, Nehemiah and Israel dedicate the walls and live in the city. I actually don't know this. These dates are certain. I'm assuming that the dedication of the wall happens at the same time. It's like pretty sure that that's what happens. And then we understand from the verse we just read, chapter 13, verse 6, that Nehemiah remains governor and he also remains in Israel for 12 years. In total for 12 years. So until 432 BC. That's chapter 5, 14, and chapter 13, verse 6. In 432 BC, Nehemiah returns to Artaxerxes in Susa in 432 BC. That's what we just read. During all this time, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, that's 432, king of Babylon, I had gone to the king. So in 432, he leaves Israel, and he goes back to Susa. And then, after some time, so chapter 13, the events of chapter 13 take place in the after some time, or during right in here. Okay, this is what we're going to be looking at, this area right here. After some time, however, I asked to leave from the king. So he goes back. He first shows up in Israel in 444. He goes back to Susa in 432. after some time, he comes back to Israel. So, chapters 1 through 12 cover all of this. And then, chapter 13 covers this part right here. Okay? Because he goes back to the king, and when he gets back to Jerusalem, however long later that is, it's a mess. Anybody? Question?
Is the mess here different than the mess that Ezra dealt with?
Is it a new mess?
Yes. I always took it as it was.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, he says he went away,
Because
and when he came back.
they dealt with the same mess not that long ago.
Right.
I mean, really, yes, sometime.
And so, right, he says, in chapter 13, verse 6, he says, I went away, which is after Ezra had cleaned up his mess. Ezra cleans up his mess. Then Nehemiah comes. Then Nehemiah goes away. Then Nehemiah comes back and finds the same things as Ezra had found and Nehemiah had found, which is unusual because people usually don't ever sin the same way twice, do they? Garrett thought that was funny. Exactly. Right. No, this is really the point of this section that I'll make. I don't want to read the whole thing. Verse 13, or verse 1, they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people. I will make this note. It's been 1,000 years since Moses has been written. But yet they're still reading it and obeying it because it is still the law. It's still the authority, but it's 1,000 years old. Doesn't matter. God hasn't changed it yet, right? So there's application for us, of course. Oh, it's been 2,000 years. It doesn't matter. We're still reading the law. Verse 3 says, they excluded all the foreigners from Israel. But we've already heard this same kind of language. We've heard it in chapter 9 of Nehemiah. We heard it in chapter 10 of Nehemiah. We also heard it in Ezra chapter 6. We've heard this same thing. There's some specific about Elisha and Tobiah. I'm going to skip that for now. In verse 10, I also discovered the portions of the Levites had not been given them, but they had promised to give them the portions of the Levites in chapter 10, verses 32 through 39. Verse 15, the Sabbath day. In those days I saw in Judah some who were treading the wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing sacks of grain. But they had already promised in chapter 10, verse 31, that they would not abuse the Sabbath. There's more to the abuse of the Sabbath. This same chapter, chapter 13, verse 23. In those days I also saw that the Jews had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. But they'd already said that they would not marry. They'd already divorced, like Ezra's day. They said, no, we won't do it. In fact, they had said in Nehemiah's day that they wouldn't do it. Oh, and then in verse 30, I purified them from everything foreign, and appointed duties for the priests and the Levites, each in his task. And I arranged the supply for wood at the appointed times, but they had already said that they would commit to the wood. When Nehemiah showed up for the first 12 years, he had already dedicated these things, every single one of them. Then he goes away for some time, and after some time, he comes back, and what does he find? The same things. If I understand this text correctly, that's what's happened. What does that say about commitment? Because they had all committed. We'll do it. He goes away, comes back, finds them doing the very thing that they had not committed to. What does this say about commitment? Fickle. Their commitment was fickle. This is what it says about them. Anything else to say about them? What do we know about commitment?
Well, this is not about commitment.
Okay.
This is something else.
Yep, go ahead.
I mean, 1 Corinthians 15:33 jumps right out of this passage.
Because of Tobiah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, he allied himself with who?
Yep.
The sinful, evil, you name it.
Yep.
You know, and how much of an influence did they have on him, which in turn had influence on everybody else?
All of whom were ripe for being influenced. Go ahead.
Well, I think it kind of speaks to the idea that a group of people need a strong leadership to keep them on task. That's kind of true then, true today. When Nehemiah was gone, kind of the cat's away, mice play sort of thing.
Yep.
Getting off track. And the same thing when Moses was up on the mountain. There's examples of it all over the place. When there was a good judge,
Yep.
things went well. And then the judge would go away and things did not go well. So some of that relates to commitment. Some of it just...
I had it separate. That's my next point. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So if you see 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, if you see one good leader, one good man, one good woman, whatever it is, if you see one good out there, what do?
Latch on to the good.
Rick Duggan says, hug him around the neck. That's it. Emphasizing how much you want. Yes, latch onto them. Don't let them go. I know you had your hand up. Let me ask this. From our human wisdom and our perspective, if William Stewart left Kingston, what would happen to that congregation?
It's strong.
At least.
At best.
At best. If Tom Rainwater left Syracuse, what would happen? You might not know this. If Dave DeBell left South New Berlin, do you know what would happen? So when I look out and I see these guys, 2 things. I'm thankful because if Lee, because we're talking about preachers here, if Lee left here, big difference. We're thankful to have so many capable men and women. So that's number 1. I'm thankful. Number 2, I see people like Dave DeBell, William Stewart, Tom Rainwater doing what they're doing, and I think to myself, I'm especially Dave. He's been there when we came here to see if we'd move here. He kind of begged us to move there because he wanted to help, and he was not going to leave. I'm not going to leave. My parents are here. There's a church here. If I leave, this church will fall apart. Those were the conversations that we had, and so he stays there. I mean, I'm impressed with that. I'm grateful for people who have that kind of dedication. What did you want to say a long time ago?
I don't know which Soviet leader said this. He said that we're not going to overtake you guys, communism, immediately. We're going to put it into you 1 drop at a time.
Yeah.
That's all it takes to erode commitment.
Right. To erode commitment. Okay, let's get back to yes, 1 drop at a time. This gets back to my question. This is really dancing around my question. What does this say about commitment? Commitment must be what? Maintained.
You can't commit part of the time. That
Right.
destroys the...
That's not.
I'm mostly committed. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't even make sense.
I'm committed sometimes.
Yeah.
That's not commitment, right? Yeah, that's really what I was going. Yeah, we'll do it, and I'm sure that one of them at the time was really thinking, I want to. This is something. He's right. They're right. These are God's words. This is God. This is good for me. I commit. I'm sure at least one person in that nation was saying that when they were committing. One of those people who later on, when Nehemiah came back, had fallen away. Commitment takes maintaining. Little tiny baby steps of maintenance and wise decisions, setting yourself up for the next minute. I'm going to make a wise decision right now that'll set me up for 1 minute from now. It'll be easier for me to be faithful as opposed to making that decision. And then 5 minutes from now, 1 hour from now, a day from now, months from now. That's the way we have to think through it. And then we have to maintain that every minute, right? Comment or question?
I was thinking about this morning, and I don't know why exactly, because I did my questions for Malachi and Nehemiah one for a little while back. But as I was driving, I was thinking about this thought this morning about how it takes commitment, it always takes commitment. And I was thinking about the fact that in the leadership roles, there's a commitment to the leadership, and Dad is right that it takes a leader to exemplify some of that stuff. But that leader could be 100% committed himself or 1,000% committed himself, and that won't necessarily establish anybody else's commitment. And it's not that other people don't have the capacity to commit, because as much wavering as we see in the world, people commit to stuff. People commit to stuff. And I was thinking that thought, people commit to stuff, as I was driving into Clayton, and I was parked there at the same time as I always park, or I'm waiting at the stoplight, same time of day as I always do 2 or 3 times a week. And the same guy walks by on his walk, and he's always wearing a shirt that talks about beer. It's always, and I always notice it because it's very loud and big. You know, I'm a hero. I rescued beer from a bottle today, or whatever. You know, he always is wearing a different shirt about beer. And I always get there at the same moment, and he always gets there at the same moment. And I was thinking about commitment, and it's like, people can commit. Yeah. People can commit. He's very committed to wearing a shirt about beer and
being there every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
You know, people have the capacity to do that, and we need to trust that they've got the power to do that.
Well, God gave it to us.
Well, yeah, God gave it to them, and so when we're working with people who are interested, we're encouraging them to commit, and that's something they're going to have to find, but they can do it, and emphasizing the fact, look, you can do that. You get up and go to work every morning. You know, you do these things. You have a family. The commitment's not the problem.
You should get there 10 minutes early and meet him, talk to him.
Right, I should do that. Yeah, grab when he's down at the other corner, right? Yeah, you're right.
Woman at the well.
Yeah.
Anything? What is the last thing? If I'm going to go forward and miss what you want to talk about, then bring it back to it. But I'm moving forward. What's the last thing we know about Nehemiah? The very last thing we know about him.
Yes, God to remember.
He's praying. That's what he does. He's a praying machine. Namely, he's praying, God, remember me. And I'm paraphrasing, but it is, I saw opportunity and I acted in accordance with your word. I knew what the opportunity was. I knew what the word called for, and I stepped up and I acted. Now, how many times have you and I, unfortunately, would have to substitute these words, remember me, I'm sorry, God, because I saw an opportunity and I did not take it. I'm guilty. I know I'm guilty. Nehemiah, here he is. 4 times in this chapter alone. Every time he says, look, I came back to the same situation, and methodically, mechanically, by faith, I just went through it and I said, hey, we got to fix this. And he's really emotionally involved there. You remember that part too? And so when he went through it, he saw the sin. This is not right. This is a situation that's bad. And so he says, let's fix this. A lot of it is form. Also, here's the form. We've got to get right back to the right form. Like George said, I can't make you commit, but I can make you match the form because I'm the governor, right? So they match the form, and then he says, Lord, remember me because I said to them, here's the form, do it, right? Others, I'm sure, said to him, and we know some of them said, oh, here comes Nehemiah again. Mm-hmm. Nehemiah, what? Why? You got to be a stickler for it's 1,000 years old, Nehemiah. Does God really care, Nehemiah? Nehemiah, oh, here he comes again. Some will say that of him, but he gets to say, God, remember me for what I did. Now, which situation you want to be in, right? Galatians 6:9 tells us, do not grow weary of doing good, for in due time we'll be able to say, God, remember me for good. I am curious why Nehemiah, to the best of my knowledge, I didn't look this up, but I don't remember Nehemiah being mentioned in Hebrews 11.
He's mentioned with others.
That's right. Because Hebrews 11 is not a list of those with great faith. It's a list of those with great faith, some of those with great faith. Hebrews 11 is a list of an illustration of how to use faith, what faith does, right?
Acts of faith. Singular.
Say it again?
Singular acts of faith. Abraham did this.
Yeah.
Abraham did this. That's over a period of time.
Well, right. And so, and he qualifies in the others. To say Nehemiah wasn't in Hebrews 11, because the guy wasn't saying, here's the greatest, and here's the greatest, and here's a list of the greatest. They're all great, and I've got these to pick from. I'll just throw some in there. And this illustrates not who is the greatest in faith, but how these great people used their faith and what they did with it. Now, the question is, if the Lord were to write a book, whether or not my name would actually end up in it, would it be qualified to end up in that book, right? Or that chapter, Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, the second revision, or the first revision. Okay.
The Lord is right.
That's right. Yep. Okay, comments or questions?
Are you about to
I'm
read
done.
Nehemiah?
Yep.
Verse 25, about leadership and commitment.
Don't do it, George.
Well,
I know you want to.
No, I mean, I was going to say,
chapter 13?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of the type, leadership takes confrontation at times. And we talked about maintenance, and good leadership appears to be the consistency to maintain this, the same thing over and over again, and always be working on the one concept, always, to keep it from falling. But when it falls, there's confrontation. And so a good housekeeper is always cleaning the house, and once every 5 years pulls everything out and burns it because because it's time.
Yeah.
It's time because things slowly slip. I confronted them, cursed them, beat some of them, and pulled out their hair. I'm not no one-for-one correlation here, but the sin needed to be addressed, and it was part of the maintenance schedule.
Right.
I think one of the other things that George also brought up leadership again, typically what you'll see is a clarity of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and a kind of a vision of here's where we need to end up, and an ability to explain that vision to get people to also believe in that vision. That is a workable sort of thing. We can get there. We can do that. And that's the sort of thing that you see in Moses, you see in Nehemiah, you see all these others, David.
Yeah.
In some crazy situations that how in the world are we going to go up against this army?
Yeah.
David. We do that.
The interesting thing is that where we're going to go is already laid out. The leader doesn't have to think about where we're going. Here the principle of the text is laid out. The leader or the other one has got to instill confidence. No, we can get there. God wouldn't tell us to do something we can't do. Whatever your means is, the good leader is the one who's going to say, yeah, we can get there, we can get there, we can get there. Yeah, Lord willing, someday.
It seems like willingness doesn't qualify you to be a leader, but unwillingness might disqualify you because
That's the elder.
right, exactly.
Right. Yeah, no, willingness alone is very dangerous, right? Like all thrust and no vector. Do I have to explain that to you?
Yeah. The most dangerous person in an organization is the one who's really motivated but not entirely competent.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones most able to do the most damage. I haven't thought of that.
Yeah, 1 Timothy 5 talks about those who make confident assertions, but they don't understand what they actually themselves are saying. And you talk with people like this all the time. You don't know what you just said. What you said, not only is it not in accordance with the scripture, but it itself does not make sense. But you run into this all the time, especially religious people. John just got up and walked away. Yesterday, we went down to meet up. John and I met. He meets somebody he knows, Sir Charles, I call him, because his name is Charles. And so I steered the conversation to biblical things, and as soon as it got to biblical things, the guy started making no sense. Not always, But often enough, the sentence did not make sense. And that happens all the time. But are you religious? Oh, yes. You know, these kinds of conversations. So the clear thinker has to figure out, okay, here's where we're not thinking clearly. Now, how in the world can we do this and speak the truth in love? Right. Yeah. Wow. Okay, we've used up the time. I didn't think we would, but we did. Comment or question? Thank you for your work. Who was leaving? George, you have something? Okay. You got a song.